There are some childhoods you don't talk about at school because everyone else seemed to have more. More clothes, more food, more space, more stuff. But looking back now, those lean years taught you something the kids with full fridges never learned. How to make do, how to stretch a dollar, how to find joy in things that cost nothing at all. If you grew up poor in 1970s Australia, you lived a different version of childhood. Not worse, just different. And these 12 signs will take you right back there. Today, we're looking at the unmistakable markers of growing up without much money in 1970s Australia. Not to feel sorry for ourselves, but to remember, because those experiences shaped who we are, taught us resilience, and gave us a perspective that money can't buy. These weren't just hardships, they were lessons, survival skills, and sometimes, in their own way, they were gifts. Powdered milk instead of fresh. If there was one dead giveaway that money was tight, it was the powdered milk. That tin of sunshine or diploma sitting in the cupboard, the stuff you would mix with water to make something that vaguely resembled milk. Your mum would scoop it out, whisk it up and pour it over your Wheat Bix or into your tea, and you would know instantly. It tasted different, thinner, slightly metallic, not quite right. But it was cheaper than fresh milk, lasted longer, and when you were counting every cent, those things mattered. Some families would mix it half and half with fresh milk to stretch the good stuff further. You would watch your mum carefully measuring, making it last, and even as a kid, you understood. This was how you got by. Your mates at school would complain about their milk going off in the fridge. You would not say anything, but you would think, we do not have that problem. Ours comes from a tin. There was no shame in it at home. It was just reality. But you learned not to invite friends over for breakfast. You did not want them to see the tin, to taste the difference, to ask questions. Powdered milk was not just about money. It was about making do, about stretching resources, about quiet sacrifices that happened in the kitchen before you even woke up. These days, powdered milk is seen as a pantry backup, something for camping trips or emergencies. But back then, for plenty of families, it was just how life worked. Hand-me-downs that went through multiple kids before reaching you. Nothing you wore was truly yours. Your clothes had a history and a lineage. They started with your older brother or your cousin or the neighbor's kid down the street, and by the time they reached you, they had been patched, faded, and worn soft by other bodies. Your school uniform was not bought new from the shop. It was handed down, sleeves rolled up, hems let down, name tags crossed out and rewritten. Your shoes had been broken in by someone else's feet. Your jumpers had pills on them before you ever pulled them on. And if you were the youngest, you got the worst of it. Everything had been through the ringer, literally. But here is the thing, you learned to make it work. You learned to ignore the teasing, to hold your head up, to take care of what you had, because there was not going to be a replacement anytime soon. Sometimes your mum would try to freshen things up, add a patch with a cool design, dye something to give it new life. She would make it an event, like you were getting something special, and maybe in a way you were. Hand-me-downs taught you that new was not everything. They taught you to be resourceful, to appreciate what you had, to understand that clothes were just fabric, not a measure of worth. You were not less because your jeans had a patch on the knee. You were just a kid getting by. And honestly, plenty of kids were in the same boat. You were not alone, even if it felt like it sometimes. One pair of school shoes per year, no matter what. You got one pair at the start of the year, and that was it. They had to last 12 months, no exceptions. Your mum would take you to the discount shoe shop, find the cheapest pair that fit, and you would wear them every single day until they fell apart. And they did fall apart. The soles would wear through, the stitching would split, the leather would crack. You would stuff cardboard inside to cover the holes, wrap tape around the sides to hold them together, and keep going. Because new shoes were not happening, kids at school would have fresh white runners, clean and bright. Yours would be scuffed, brown, held together with hope and determination. You would try to hide them, tuck your feet under your desk, avoid sports days where everyone could see. But there was no hiding it. Everyone knew. The teachers knew. The other kids knew. And if you were lucky, they did not say anything. If you were not, well, kids could be cruel. Your mum would check your shoes every few months, sighing at the damage, knowing there was no money to replace them. Sometimes she would take them to the cobbler, get them resold if she could scrape together a few dollars. Sometimes she would just tell you to be more careful, even though you were already walking as gently as you could. Those shoes were not just footwear. They were a test of endurance, a daily reminder of limits, a lesson in making things last. And when you finally got a new pair the next January, it felt like a miracle. Mowing lawns and collecting bottles for pocket money. If you wanted money, you worked for it. There was no allowance, no handouts, no cash just for existing. You mowed lawns for the neighbours, collected empty bottles to return for the deposit, and did odd jobs wherever you could find them. Your old man would send you out with the push mower, and you would knock on doors up and down the street, offering to cut grass for $1 or $2. Some people said yes, some waved you off, but you kept going because every bit counted. Collecting bottles was a whole operation. You would scour the gutters, check the bins behind the pub, and ask relatives to save their empties. Then you carted them down to the bottle shop in a rusty wagon or an old pram, lined them up on the counter, and watched the bloke count them out. 5 cents here, 10 cents there, it added up slowly. Other kids had pocket money handed to them every week, no questions asked. You had to earn every cent. You learned the value of $1 because you sweated for it, walked miles for it, and worked until your back ached for it. When you finally had enough to buy a chocolate bar or a comic, it tasted better because you had earned it yourself. There was pride in that, quiet and unspoken. You were not being given charity. You were working, contributing, proving you could handle it. Those early jobs, scrappy and small as they were, taught you something crucial. Nothing comes free. And if you want something, you go out and get it. Bulk buying damaged or day-old bread from the bakery. Your mum knew the bakery schedule. She knew when the day-old bread went on sale, when the damaged loaves got marked down, and she was there waiting. You walked out with bags full of bread, some squashed, some with the crust a bit too dark, all of it cheap. You ate bread with every meal, toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, bread and butter with dinner. It was filling, it was cheap, and it lasted if you froze half of it. Sometimes the bread was fine, just a day old. Sometimes it was stale, and you had to toast it to make it edible. But you did not complain. Bread was bread. Other families bought fresh loaves from the supermarket, soft and white and perfect. Yours came from the bargain bin at the back of the bakery, and you learned not to mention it. The bakery staff got to know your mum, saved the marked down stuff for her, and treated her kindly. There was a community in that, an understanding that everyone was doing their best. Those bags of bread were not just about saving money. They were about feeding a family on next to nothing, about making sure no one went hungry, even when the budget was stretched to breaking. You learned that food did not have to be perfect to be good. And years later, you still felt a little thrill finding marked down bread at the shop. even though you could afford full price. Old habits die hard. Mending, darning, and patching instead of replacing. Nothing got thrown away if it could be fixed. Your mum was a wizard with a needle and thread, darning socks until there was more patch than sock, sewing up split seams, attaching patches over holes. You would sit and watch her work, her hands moving quickly and efficiently, making the worn usable again. Clothes were not disposable. When your jeans ripped, they got patched. When your socks wore through, they got darned. When buttons fell off, they got sewn back on, usually with a mismatched button from the jar in the kitchen drawer. That jar was sacred. Every button that fell off anything went in there, saved for future repairs. Your jumpers had elbow patches. Your school shirts had collars that had been turned and re-sewn. Your sheets had been mended so many times they were more stitches than fabric. But they were clean, they worked, and that is what mattered. Other kids had wardrobes full of new clothes. You had a small collection of carefully maintained, endlessly repaired items that had to last. You learned to be gentle with your things, to make them last, because replacing them was not an option. And you learned that there was skill in mending, value in repair, dignity in making do. These days, we throw things away at the first sign of wear. But back then, waste was not an option. Everything had life left in it if you knew how to look. The bathtub once a week rule. Water cost money. Heating water cost money. So baths were rationed. Once a week, maybe twice if you were lucky, and you would share the bath water with your siblings. The oldest went first, then the next, then the youngest, everyone using the same tub of water. By the time you were done, the water was lukewarm and murky, but you were clean enough. In between baths, it was a flannel wash at the sink, cold water, quick and efficient. You would strip down, scrub yourself with a wet cloth and call it done. It was not comfortable, but it worked. Kids at school would talk about their nightly baths, their hot showers, the luxury of clean water whenever they wanted it. You would nod along, not mentioning that your weekly bath was an event, something planned and rationed. There was no shame in it at home. Your mum made it normal, made it practical. This is how we save money. This is how we make things work. And you accepted it because what else could you do? The once-a-week bath was not just about water bills. It was about survival, about stretching resources, about making sacrifices in small, invisible ways. Years later, when you had your own place and could shower every day, you would still feel a little guilty about the water running down the drain. Old lessons do not fade. Cordial, stretched thin, soft drink only on special occasions. Soft drink was a luxury. You did not have it in the fridge, you did not buy it at the shops, you did not expect it. If you wanted something sweet to drink, you got cordial. Not the good thick stuff either. Your mum would mix it so thin you could barely taste it, just a hint of flavour in a glass of water. Cotties or solo cordial was stretched to last for weeks, rationed carefully. You would watch her pour the tiniest splash into the jug, fill it with water, and stir. That is what you got. Soft drink appeared maybe 3 times a year. Christmas, your birthday, maybe a special family barbecue if someone else brought it. And when it did, you would savor it, make it last, drink it slowly, because you did not know when you would get it again. Your mates at school would talk about having Coke or Fanta at home whenever they wanted. You would smile and nod, not mentioning that your version of a treat was watered down cordial. There was no judgment at home. Cordial was practical, affordable, and it kept you hydrated. That was all that mattered. But you noticed the difference. You noticed when other kids had more, and you learned to be grateful for what you had. These days, soft drink is everywhere, cheap and accessible. But if you grew up on thin cordial, you still remember the taste, still remember making do, and you still feel that old thrill when you get something sweet to drink. Cordial, stretched thin, soft drink was a luxury, plain and simple. It was not something you kept in the fridge, not something you bought at the shops on a regular basis, not something you expected to see on the table with dinner. If you wanted something sweet to drink, you got cordial, and not the good thick stuff that actually tasted like something. Your mum would mix it so thin you could barely detect the flavour, just the faintest hint of raspberry or lemon in what was essentially coloured water. She would pull out the bottle of Cotties or Solo cordial from the cupboard, unscrew the cap, and pour the tiniest splash into the big glass jug. You would watch, hoping she would add just a bit more, but she never did. Then she would fill it to the brim with tap water, give it a quick stir, and that was it. That is what you got. You would pour yourself a glass and hold it up to the light, seeing straight through it, knowing it was more water than anything else. But you would drink it anyway, because it was better than plain water, and complaining did not change anything. The cordial had to last. One bottle needed to stretch for weeks, sometimes a month if money was particularly tight. Your mum knew exactly how much to use to make it go the distance, and she measured it out like it was liquid gold. Every drop counted. Every pour was calculated. There was no such thing as making it stronger, making it taste better. It was what it was, and you learned to accept it. Real soft drink appeared maybe 3 times a year if you were lucky. Christmas Day, definitely. Your birthday, probably. Maybe a special family barbecue if relatives were visiting and someone else brought it. And when it did appear, it was an event. You would see that bottle of Coke or Fanta sitting on the table and your eyes would light up. You would wait impatiently for someone to pour it, watching every bubble, every fizz, and when you finally got your glass, you would drink it slowly, making it last as long as humanly possible because you did not know when you would get it again. You would roll it around in your mouth, savoring the sweetness, the carbonation, the realness of it. This was what soft drink was supposed to taste like. This was what other kids had whenever they wanted it. But for you, it was a rare treat, something special to be appreciated and remembered. Your mates at school would talk casually about having Coke or Fanta at home, about helping themselves from the fridge whenever they felt like it. They would mention it like it was nothing, like soft drink was just part of everyday life. And for them, it was. But you would sit there listening, smiling and nodding, never mentioning that your version of a cold drink was cordial watered down until it barely had a colour. You learned early not to talk about what you did not have. It was easier that way. At other kids' birthday parties, there would be soft drink everywhere. Bottles lined up on the table, kids pouring themselves glass after glass without thinking twice about it. You would have some, of course, but you would be careful not to seem too eager, not to take too much, not to reveal how special this was for you. You would watch kids waste half their glass, pour it out, grab more, and you would feel something twist inside. They did not know how lucky they were. They did not understand that for some families, soft drink was not casual. It was a luxury. There was no judgment at home about the thin cordial. Your mum never apologized for it, never made it seem like something to be ashamed of. It was just practical, just sensible, just how things worked when money was tight. Cordial was affordable, it lasted, it kept you hydrated, and it gave you something that tasted vaguely sweet. That was all that mattered. That was all you could afford. But you noticed the difference. You noticed when other kids had more, when they took things for granted, when they did not have to ration or stretch or make do. And you learned to be grateful for what you had, even if what you had was mostly water with a hint of artificial raspberry. These days, soft drink is everywhere. It is cheap, it is accessible, you can buy it whenever you want without thinking twice. But if you grew up on thin cordial, if you remember those watered down jugs and those rare special occasion bottles, you still carry that with you. You still remember what it felt like to make do. You still remember the taste of going without. And sometimes, Even now, when you pour yourself a glass of something cold and sweet, you think about your mum measuring out that tiny splash of cordial, making it last, doing her best. And you understand, finally, what she was really teaching you, that you can survive on less than you think. That luxury is not a right, it is a gift. And that sometimes, just sometimes, watered down cordial is enough. Christmas presents from the op shop or made by hand. Christmas was different when money was tight. There was no mountain of presents under the tree, no expensive toys fresh in their boxes, no latest crazes that every other kid at school would be getting. You got 1 or 2 gifts, maybe 3 if it was a particularly good year, and they were usually second-hand or homemade. And deep down, even as a kid, you knew it. Mum would spend months preparing, scouring op shops and jumble sales, looking for things she could afford, things that were still good enough to wrap up and put under the tree. She inspected every item carefully, checking for damage, making sure it still worked, trying to find something you would actually want. A used bike with a bit of rust but solid wheels. A board game missing a few pieces but still playable. A toy someone else had loved and outgrown, cleaned up and wrapped in secondhand paper. She did her best to make it look special, to make it feel new, but you could tell. The box was worn, the edges soft, the tape yellowed. It had belonged to someone else first. Or she made things herself, sitting up late at night after you had gone to bed. Knitted jumpers in colours she could afford the wool for. Sewn dolls with button eyes and wool hair. Wooden toys your dad built in the shed, sanded smooth and painted with whatever paint he had lying around. Everything was made with love, made with care, made with hours of work and worry. But it was not new, it was not shop bought, and you knew that mattered even if you did not want it to. You woke up on Christmas morning with that familiar mix of excitement and dread. Excitement because it was Christmas, because there were presents with your name on them, because maybe this year would be different. Dread because you already knew what you would find. You unwrapped your gifts slowly, carefully, trying to make the moment last, trying to summon genuine surprise and joy. When you saw what was inside, you forced a smile, said thank you, and meant it. Because you understood, even as a kid, that your parents had done their best. They had stretched every dollar, worked every angle, sacrificed things you would never know about, and this was what they could give you. Your mum watched your face anxiously, searching for disappointment, hoping she had chosen right. Your dad looked away, jaw tight, wishing he could give you more. You hugged them, told them you loved it, played with whatever it was, because you knew they needed to believe you were happy. And part of you understood the love behind those op shop finds and handmade gifts, even if another part of you wished for something new, something shiny, something no one else had owned first. Then January came, and you went back to school, and every other kid was bragging. New bikes with training wheels and streamers, electronic games that beeped and flashed, remote control cars, model train sets, piles and piles of toys, more than any kid could actually play with. They went on and on about what they got, what Santa brought them, how amazing Christmas was. You listened quietly, nodding, smiling, not mentioning your second-hand bike or your homemade doll, not explaining that Santa did not come to your house because your parents could not afford to pretend, not revealing that your Christmas was smaller, quieter, made of love instead of money. There was love in what you got, even if it was not shiny and new. Your mum's tired eyes on Christmas morning told you that. Your dad's rough hands, calloused from extra work, told you that. Those op-shop presents and handmade toys were worth more than anything expensive because they cost your parents everything they had. Every spare cent, every spare hour, every ounce of hope that they could make Christmas feel magical despite having very little. Years later, when you had kids of your own and money in your pocket, you would stand in toy stores, surrounded by abundance, and you would remember. You would remember what it felt like to unwrap something secondhand and pretend it was perfect. You would remember your mum's anxious face, your dad's quiet shame. And you would realize those Christmas mornings taught you something precious. Gifts are not about money, they are about sacrifice. They are about giving what you can when you have nothing to give. And that is worth more than all the new toys in the world. Sharing beds with siblings. You didn't have your own room. You didn't even have your own bed. You shared, squeezed in with a brother or sister, sometimes two, in a bed that was not quite big enough for everyone. You would argue about space, about who was stealing the covers, about who was hogging the middle. You would wake up with someone's elbow in your ribs, someone's feet in your face, someone's knee digging into your back. But that was just how it was. That was life. Bedrooms were for families that had space, families that had money, for extra furniture, extra beds, bigger houses. You had what you had, and you made it work. 3 kids in a double bed, lined up like sardines, fighting for territory all night long. Your mum would tuck you in, tell you to settle down, and close the door. After that, it was survival of the fittest. Some nights you would lie there, squashed against the wall or teetering on the edge, dreaming about having your own bed, your own space, your own privacy. A place where you could stretch out without hitting someone, where you could read under the covers with a torch without being told to turn it off, where you could just be alone. But most nights, you would just fall asleep, exhausted from the day, too tired to care about the lack of space. There was a kind of comfort in it too, even if you did not recognize it then. You were not alone. On cold winter nights, you had built-in warmth, bodies pressed together, keeping the chill away. When you were scared, when you had a nightmare or heard a strange noise, there was someone right there. You did not have to call out or walk down a dark hallway. Comfort was 6 inches away. Years later, when you finally had your own bed, your own room, it felt strange. Too much space, too quiet, too empty. Part of you missed the crowded warmth of those shared nights, even if you would never admit it. There was a single fan in summer and no heating in winter. Temperature control was not a thing. You had one fan for the whole house, if you were lucky, and it got moved from room to room depending on who needed it most. In summer, you would sweat through the nights, lying on top of the sheets, windows open wide, hoping for a breeze that never came. The fan would rotate slowly, giving each person a few seconds of relief before moving on. It was never enough, but it was all you had. In winter, there was no heating, nothing. You piled on extra blankets, wore jumpers to bed, sometimes even beanies, and huddled together for warmth. Your breath would fog in the morning, the house so cold you did not want to leave the covers, but eventually you had to. Your mum would light the stove, the only source of heat, and you would crowd around it before school, trying to warm up enough to face the day. Other kids had heaters, air conditioning, comfortable homes year-round. You had survival tactics. You learned that being cold or hot was not the end of the world. You could endure it, push through it, and keep going. Those uncomfortable nights taught you something valuable. Comfort is a luxury. When you did not have it, you learned to be tougher than the people who did. Years later, when you could afford heating and cooling, you would still feel guilty using it, still hesitate before turning it on. You remembered what it was like to go without, and that memory stays with you forever.